Data governance. I'm Dr. Mary Cecil. $3.1 trillion. IBM's estimate of the yearly cost of bad data in the U.S. alone. Research from Experian Data Quality found that bad data has a direct impact on the bottom line of 88% of American companies. The average losses from bad data was 12% of the company's overall revenue. A Gartner report found that 27% of data in the world's top companies is flawed. There's a huge opportunity here for leaders. If we can improve data quality, we can see improvements from day-to-day operations to the bottom line. So what is bad data? Empty fields that should contain data. Information that's not been entered correctly or maintained. Data that's been entered in the wrong field. Data that hasn't been normalized. A single account, contact, lead that occupies more than one record in the database. Misspellings, typos, transpositions, variations in spelling, naming, or formatting. Fortune 1000 enterprises will lose more money in operational inefficiency due to bad data that they will spend on data warehousing and customer relationship managed software systems. So what are the consequences of bad data? Higher consumption of resources, higher maintenance costs, errors in product production, mail deliveries, lower customer satisfaction, lower customer retention, distorted campaign success metrics. It takes more time to reconcile data. Failure of marketing initiatives. Dissatisfied sales and distribution channels, higher spam counts, higher unsubscribes, negative publicity, misinformed decisions, invalid reports, lower productivity, loss in revenues, and more legal costs because of litigation. Let's look at some litigation here.
This is Colin O'Keefe here for LXBN TV. The Supreme Court agreed to take up an interesting case in Spokeo v. Robbins. While the suit focuses on the Fair Credit Reporting Act, it could have far greater implications than just there. To explain, we bring in attorney Kristen McMillie. She's chair of Davis Wright Tremaine's Privacy and Data Security Practice and author on the firm's Privacy and Security Law blog. Kristen, first off, for those who are unaware, potentially just how big this case could be, can you walk us through the basics of the suit and what's at stake here?
Sure. So the basics, just as a reminder, as you mentioned, this is a Fair Credit Reporting Act case. It was initially filed as a class action in a district court in California, and the plaintiff, Robbins, alleged that the defendant, Spokeo, had published certain information about Robbins that was inaccurate and that had certain implications, negative implications for his future employment prospects. As background, Spokeo is an online company that aggregates data and from publicly available information sources. And when somebody goes to the Spokeo site or conducts an internet search, information will be displayed about that person when you do a search by that person's name. So in this case, the information that was displayed about Robbins by the Spokeo search results were the fact that he actually had more education and more professional experience than he actually had, that he was married when in reality he was not, and that he actually was in a better financial position than he was. So while these don't seem like terrible pieces of misinformation, allegedly it caused him distress. He thought it may affect certain employment opportunities that he had, and that it was a violation of the Fair Credit Reporting Act statute, which is supposed to give consumers the opportunity to, one, consent to the sharing of this type of information for certain purposes, as well as give consumers the opportunity to correct the information when it's inaccurate. And the plaintiff, Robbins, alleged that Spokeo was a consumer reporting agency subject to the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and that by publishing these reports, it had violated the statute. Unfortunately, neither the issue of whether Spokio is in fact a consumer reporting agency or whether or not the search results were consumer reports under the statute was addressed by the district court. Instead, and what really makes this case so interesting is the court said there was no harm and therefore ultimately dismissed the case. The Ninth Circuit, however, reversed the district court holding, and it found that when Congress creates a statute that has a statutory right and there are statutory damages associated with it, a technical violation of the statute in and of itself can create the required Article 3 standing. So Spokio has now taken this to the Supreme Court, and they are asking the court to resolve the question, is a technical harm of a statute enough to confer Article 3 standing, or does there have to be actual harm in order for plaintiffs to proceed? The implications, as you can imagine, in our current class action environment could be huge.
Absolutely. This is a very, very big case, of course, especially nowadays where there's a lot of class actions in the privacy and data security realm, which is, of course, why I'm speaking to you here today. Can you explain, the potential impact with that issue? What's the potential impact of the Supreme Court's ruling in the realm of, say, privacy and data security, depending on the ruling here?
Sure. So there are so many statutes, as you mentioned, that are within the realm of privacy and information security that both confer statutory private rights of action and have statutory damages. And the amounts that we're talking about, if we look at the Video Privacy Protection Act, for instance, which is supposed to prevent against the unauthorized disclosure of consumers viewing information. So in that instance, it's a no less than $2,500 per violation. You can imagine how quickly those damages will add up. If you look at today, I believe it was the Second Circuit just came out with a ruling about the NSA's bulk collection activities, right? So if a provider isn't able to claim immunity under the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, that also has a private right of action, and we're talking about $1,000, no less than $1,000. I have to say no less because this is, these are the statutory damages. They add up so quickly, and it can actually be more than that, but no less than $1,000 per individual. So imagine a case where you have, if we're talking about a statute that, for instance, may have retention requirements and a company keeps the records longer than it's supposed to, but the records aren't disclosed to anybody. There's no actual harm to the plaintiff. It was a pure technical violation, and maybe they were destroyed 6 months later. Now you're talking about, let's say that company has, 10,000 customers. That's a relatively small company today. When you think about companies that have millions of consumers' information on file, and you take $500 statutory damages, which would be at the low end or let's just take 1,000, right? So now we're talking about 10,000 customers. I should have done this math before we got on the phone, but I think we're talking in the range of about $10 million, which is a significant amount of money for a technical violation that resulted in no actual harm. State statutes, same thing. California shined the light. There could be a technical violation of that where the company doesn't respond within 30 days to the request for information, even if they hadn't shared the consumer's information within the last 12 months. So again, no harm, but we could be looking at huge class action violations and statutory award damages. So I think this will add up rather quickly. One thing that I see coming out of this from a data breach standpoint, we're seeing a lot more legislation introduced. Some of at least the initial proposals have had these private rights of action and statutory damages. I think that's something that companies are really going to want to be on guard about because, as we know, state legislatures move a lot more quickly than our U.S. Congress. I think another thing to think about is, if the Supreme Court and the Solicitor General has weighed in here, he's actually weighed in on the side of the respondents, which would mean that the violation of the statute alone is enough to confer that Article 3 standing. So I could see a lot more lobbying at the federal level to make changes to existing statutes like the VPPA or ECPA. to change it to either remove the private right of action in its entirety and give either the FTC or state attorneys general the enforcement authority. This is not unprecedented. We've seen this in recent statutes like the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act or CAN-SPAM even. Or if they don't want to take the private right of action away altogether, to at least put a cap on statutory damages. So maybe something that would cause a company to think about what it's doing, maybe $1 million, but you wouldn't get into these hundreds of millions of dollars of potential damages. Both of those, I think, are opportunities for Congress to rethink some of these statutes going forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's just a really interesting case to watch and a huge case to watch. It's kind of flying under the radar, at least a little bit initially in terms of the mainstream media, but it's just really interesting because, of course, the idea of quantifiable harm is always at issue, whether it's a data breach or really any kind of privacy litigation. So it's going to be very interesting to see which way this case goes, and we'll have to keep an eye on it and keep an eye, of course, on your publication. Again, that was Kristen McNeely of Davis Triton Maine. You can find more of their insight on this case now, and I'm soon going forward as well at PrivSecBlog.com. Thank you for joining me today, Kristen.
Thanks, Colin.
And so data governance is the overall manage of the availability, usability, integrity, security of data used in the enterprise. And a sound data governance program includes a governing body or council, a defined set of procedures, and a plan to execute those procedures. It's a quality control discipline. It controls elements of data quality, data management, information governance, policy development, business process improvement, and compliance and risk management. It includes measures for different stakeholders, not just for IT, but for users as well. It's a shared responsibility requiring a culture change, considering data as an organizational asset. Most organizations have data governance without calling it data governance. Data governance may include strategies for data quality, thinking of database management measures here, such as constraints, keys, relationships, required fields, drop-down choices, normalizations on the database itself. And data management refers to administrative processes such as database management systems, including backups, restores, storage of data, who accesses the data, who requests access to the data. Policy management is the documentation of rules and guidelines of an organization or department. We might document who will use the data in what way, how long the data will be kept. Business process improvement is making the work more efficient, streamlining the steps that the data goes through. Compliance is meeting standards set up by regulatory agencies. And risk management, trying to minimize the possibilities of bad things happening. If something does happen, how can we keep the damage to a minimum, as little as possible? So what are some steps to data governance? First, recruiting a strong executive sponsor. Just like in a broader information governance effort, data governance requires cross-functional collaboration with a variety of stakeholders. To drive and facilitate this sometimes difficult conversation, a strong executive sponsor is necessary. It may not be an easy task because generally executives don't want to deal with the minute details at the data level. We have to focus on that business benefit of improved data governance, talking about those real dollars that we talked about earlier. Access your current state. Survey the organization to see where the data lives, what problems are related to the data, and what are some opportunities. Document where the data program is, where does it stand today, and then map out our road to improvement. Set the ideal state, vision, and strategy. Create a realistic vision of where the organization wants to go in its data governance efforts, and clearly articulate the business benefit of getting there. Articulate a measurable impact. Track your progress with metrics and milestones. Compute the value of the data. Try to put some hard numbers to it. Create some internal numbers on how much data can add to a specific business unit. Data is different than most assets that we can see and touch, and it changes daily, but there is some real value. Try to find some value for the data. Assess risks. What's the likelihood and potential cost of a data breach? What about a major breach? What factors come into play, and how might we combat these potential threats? Perform a risk assessment to rank and prioritize threats. Assign probabilities to those threats. Create appropriate strategies to counter potential threats. Implement a going forward strategy. It is a significantly greater risk to try to improve data governance across the enterprise for existing data versus a smaller business unit. We might be trying to fix years, if not decades, of bad behavior. Mismanagement, lack of governance. Take an incremental approach with an eye to the future, an eye required to implement to the future, a strategy where new data governance policies for handling data are implemented beginning on a certain future date is a good best practice. Assign accountability for data quality to business units, not IT. Typically, IT's had the responsibility for data quality, yet the data generation is most likely not under IT. It's mostly in a business unit. Manage the change. Train departments, individuals, to understand why data governance is important. Why is it being implemented? How will it benefit the business? New policies represent a culture change. Monitor the data governance program. See where the shortfalls might be and continue to fine-tune the program. Technologies can help. Amazon Web Services have a product, Simple Storage Services S3. They also have AWS data governance, including Elastic, MapReduce, Athena, a metric query engine for data residing in S3. For provisioning cloud environment, AWS CloudFormation allows you to use a simple text file to model and provision all the resources needed for your application. Amazon CloudWatch monitors and collects measures on all the resources. AWS System Manager allows you to monitor all your resources and automate common operational tasks. And there is AWS OpsWorks for Configuration Manager. IBM, they are a veteran of data governance due to its mainframe heritage. It offers standalone DBMS, including various versions of DB2, IBM Pure Data System for Analytics, DB2 Analytics Accelerate, Hadoop through IBM Big Insights, Data First Method, and IBM Watson. Its primary governance system is IBM Information Server, which provides a unified governance for your data. It helps users find and surf through assets, explore relationships between assets, search unstructured data sources as well as structured database, and allows for automatic discovery of new data. Microsoft, its data governance starts with its flagship productivity suite, Office 365. It allows customers to manage its full content lifecycle from creating data, to storing it, to creating policies, to retaining it, to deleting content. It runs on top of different Microsoft products, starting with SQL Server. It offers Azure SQL Data Warehouse, Azure HD Insight, Azure Data Lake for data collection, and SQL Data Warehouse. Oracle starts with its product, Oracle Database 12c, along with Oracle Big Data Management System, Big Data SQL, Big Data Connectors. For specific data governance, it has Oracle Enterprise Metadata Manager and Oracle Enterprise Data Quality. It offers turnkey hardware systems for its software stack through Oracle Exadata Database Machine and Oracle Big Data Appliance. It has cloud services like Oracle Database as a Service. SAP, the last Oracle competitor left standing, SAP offers its DBMS for in-memory DBS and analytics. There is SAP Master Data Governance, which consolidates and governs data from one location to ensure data quality and consistency. There's also Google.
Good afternoon. How's everyone doing? Nice. It's 2 o'clock. We're ready, right? Okay, my name is Evren. I'm the Director of Product Management in Data Analytics Organization in Google Cloud. And today I have my guest, Michelle. She will join us in a few seconds. If you want, you can come up here too. Yeah. And today's topic is data governance in this world. And we got a lot of questions yesterday, even during my presentation for streaming analytics. One of you have asked, I think you're there. Thank you. I love that topic. This is something we're going to talk about probably at length over the years. But I wanted to start what we're going to discuss today. And Michelle is going to cover a lot of insight for you guys. I'm really excited to have her here with us. And we're going to talk about what data governance is, what companies are doing. In the end, I'm going to cover about what we're doing on Google Cloud to help you really deal with your world and how these things can be actually enabling capabilities to grow your businesses. So let's talk about data. Data is getting bigger and bigger. I think I mentioned this yesterday too. By 2020, every one of us in the world, every second, will produce about 2 megabits of data every second. That's a lot of data. Sum them up. There's about 88 billion of us. That's quite a bit of number.
That's a lot of data.
Look at all those things that we're seeing today. There are businesses being built around us, but still we're scratching the surface of what we can do with data. Either we're not ready, either we're afraid of it, or we don't have the right tools for it. Who remembers the V's of the data, the big data? Remember? Velocity, variety, volume. Those three things are still kicking really, really high. Take a look at the volume and variety. It's tripling. Fantastic for us because you can take this data and generate some great insights for your businesses. But if you're not prepared to deal with it, that won't help you. Look at the velocity. It is shaping up immensely. Yesterday, we talked about streaming, and I had a partner on stage with me, AB Tasty. They were talking about how they were utilizing this real-time data to generate revenues for their customers. You can do the same. If you can harness how you can use the data, if you can turn governance into revenue-generating mechanism for yourself. We are seeing businesses building data and events-driven structures for themselves. You can do the same. We have the platform for you. We have the means for you. There are a lot of things that we're learning. But I said, we're not really using all the data available in hands. Take a look at this. Only 1% of the unstructured data is in use. Only 1%. If you look at the 50% of the structured data is still sitting and not being used for decision making, we're leaving it. We're leaving value behind us. What will it take for us to really get there? I think all of us know why we can't do this, right? It's complex. Data is distributed everywhere. Lots of legacy applications, silos. We may not have the talent, but there's still a way. What do you think?
Well, we have to address people. I know. We have to address people. What do we really want? We want to be able to use it. We want to be able to interact with it. We want to be able to play with our data. But our experience around our data is really, we struggle with it. We struggle with it on a small data scale. And if we struggle with it there, we're going to struggle with it on a big data scale. Who owns the data?
All right, let's some guesses. It has to be interactive. Who owns the data?
Who owns the data?
Good. All right, that's one way. Collectors. Okay. Do you own your data?
No.
Company owns the data?
These are way better answers than what I usually get.
That's good. See,
we have smart Googlers in the room. A few years ago, we started asking the question, who owns the data? Looking at it through the lens of saying, where's the data strategy sit? Where does governance sit? Where does master data management sit? All things that help us better understand and take advantage of our information to make decisions, to grow our revenues, to create great customer experiences. And data decision makers, what did they say? IT owns it, 50% of them. IT, take care of it.
Who's in IT here?
All right.
Do you own the data?
Do you want to own the data? No. No.
Great.
So what do we do? So that was back in 2015. In 2018, we asked the question again. And what did the data decision makers say? They said IT still owns it, and more of them said that IT owns it. So what does that actually mean? I mean, you said who created it, where does it come from, who's taking care of it, and it really boils down to this. I want my data to work. Stop frustrating me every time I go into my application, every time I go into my business intelligence, every time I'm trying to run analytics, every time I'm just trying to figure out who my customer is so I can have a grand old party, right?
Don't lock your data.
Don't
Make it work
lock
for you.
it up. Make it work for you. And when they talk about, or when our respondents talked about IT owns the data, it's because the complexity of it is a nightmare. It's what we deal with every day. We need to simplify it. So what we're going to do is now take this to data governance, because data governance really is that accelerator to make it happen. Do you believe that?
And she will convince you guys
Yeah.
how data governance is an accelerator for the business.
Accelerator. So let's introduce you to data governance first.
There we go. So if you look at data governance, little history. If you go back, some of you are coming from the very highly regulated industries. Back in 2007, it was specific to the departments. Very specific. In 2008, if you remember, there was this crisis. Lots of regulation around the financial data. What can be done, who can be done, very prescriptive. Remember those days? Things have changed. But if you look at today, where we are, GDPR happened, right, in Europe. In here, CCPA is happening. Don't be afraid of it. It's actually going to help you make more sense from your data. What's driving the governance in the data governance in the initiatives?
We want to connect to our customers, see who they are, get a customer 360. We want to control our data, protect ourselves, stay in compliance. We know that our regulators look at how we use data and the type of data that we're collecting to say how we're doing. We just don't feel like we're in control. It's that make that data work thing. If we don't have great experiences, how can we trust our information to make decisions?
Every one of them are actually asking about these things. The complexity of the data, lack of control, or maybe the perception of control, and how we can actually operationally drive efficiencies around it, and risk management. These are all items that are driving the governance needs. Now, it is about policy, it's about people, it's about technology. Now, you might say, hey, I heard the same thing for other things too, but it's absolutely true. But there are specific cases that we can actually leverage and build together to really make this thing work for you. It is going to be driving the success.
Right.
How does it come to rescue?
How's it come to the rescue?
Yeah.
Well, data governance is like any other competency and practice in our business. People, process, technology. Sounds really boring on the surface of it, but it's that brain trust that comes together, where not only are you trying to drive down the complexity, whether you're trying to mitigate risk, but on the other hand, we do have strategies of getting value from our data. And we need policies that enable us to democratize it and to find those great insights. And so when we talk about data governance as that starting point for that value and accelerating our business forward, that's how we should really be thinking about our governance program. It's a strategic competency. It's not just...
Have you seen examples how people have operationalized this?
Oh,
is it a low ball?
Yeah, it's a low ball. Thank you.
Who does this thing well these days?
So I think John Deere has done some really interesting things.
Anyone in here in the world of where John Deere is similar to? Some manufacturing, operations?
Farming.
Okay, good. Well, maybe they'll take advantage.
All right.
There you go.
Let's tell a little bit of story about this. Just like every other company here, all of you here, governance is a nightmare. And when we've started on big data and predictive and prescriptive analytics, we don't want anything getting in our way. So what do? We grab the data we need and we start analyzing it and we build insights. This is what John Deere was really focused on. How do we help farming communities drive better crop yields? How do we better manage the finances around crop insurance, for example? And so they were just grabbing all of this IoT data off of their tractors, watching how those tractors were operating in the fields, how the seeds and the fertilizer was going, how the harvesting was happening, relating this all back to their customers and the finances to support this, as well as the dealerships who are helping with a lot of the fixes on the equipment. What happens though? They ran into a problem. They weren't thinking about governance. They weren't thinking about what is the org structure of themselves in order to relate back to their customers and dealerships. They didn't have the proper master data around their customers and their dealerships. So you can think about how do you create all these relationships and really understand what information can I share or should I share with whom? There are things that agronomists don't want to share with the dealerships or they don't want to share with their banks. It's very personal. And when you move equipment around in big farming areas, what happens? They don't just tractor down the street. You're not always stuck behind the International Harvester. Sometimes they're put on flatbeds and they move. What happens when you move that tractor 50 miles and you're trying to figure out how your harvest is going? That's a problem. So a lot of data quality issues were starting to come up. So what they really did is they took a look at how they were moving forward very quickly. They were running a DevOps agile development practice, not thinking about governance as requirements. Now they start to bring those business requirements in that really drive the policies, the understanding about who their customers are, who their dealerships are, who they are as an org, understanding how their equipment runs. And it's not just this control thing that drives you away, but it actually brings the value back in. And so rather than struggling for another year with these practices, they're able to really drive forward very, very quickly because the information is trusted and the value of the insights really come together.
This is why we wanted to share some of these examples with you early on, because if you are on this path and start actually looking at it, down the road, you'll start seeing, hey, we didn't really think about these. It's best to really consider what we need to do collectively as you're building your operations around data, around events, and what you want to do around big data, because governance is going to be your guide. Governance is going to be your help. It's going to be there to really help you accelerate some of the things that are coming in your way that you may not be considering it today.
So how do you start to look at this? Well, you want to have a vision for the future. You want a success story.
Absolutely.
You want to know what success looks like. So let's connect the dots between what information that we have.
Does it matter which industry to the other industry?
No difference.
No difference.
No
so they may not be
difference.
Farmers in here.
You don't have to be a farmer.
Okay, good.
You don't have to be a mechanic.
Okay.
You don't have to be an engineer. You can be all of those things.
But they have supply chains somehow.
They have supply chains.
They have systems that they run.
They do. They've got financial systems. It's your business. It doesn't matter. And everybody has a vision for where their business should go and what those objectives are. So build your success story around that. Start with, where are my business opportunities? How is data going to shape that for me? Where do I want to take my business forward?
That's true.
John Deere's example there is to push the envelope on not just being a farming equipment company. They want to help you do a better job at bringing products to market them yourself. And recognizing, being real about the challenges that you face, not just that you're missing information, but really holistically looking at how you interact and engage with that data and how you're going to put it to use. Look at the people and processes, the experiences around that data, from the point of bringing it in to the point of where it's being presented to the point where you're making decisions and taking actions off of that. Now you can start looking at a much more holistic solution for your data strategies overall, for the management of that, and taking into account the governance policies that are going to happen from it. And then it boils down to, how do I know I did a great job? How do I sell myself? How do I tell that story? How do I get that next promotion? It's, what did I do great from a data management perspective? What did I do great from a data governance perspective? And what did I do great from a business perspective? So you have 3 different points of view for every stakeholder that is part of delivering value. And 69% of companies who do this, who think from a business-led perspective, have data governance and programs, have data governance programs in place. So that doesn't look like putting the brakes on your business, does it?
They have grown.
And the way that you start to enable and drive culture change around that is, how do you know the data's good? Where do you put in these cues as you bring data in, as you're going to use it, as you distribute that out to your customers? You're looking at social mechanisms that say, I like my data, and you see the thumbs up, you see a star that says it's certified and it's managed and it's governed well, so I know somebody's taking a look at it and has a vested interest in my personal success with the data. And there's also cues from a governance perspective to say, are we hitting up against any regulations?
Yeah.
Are there risks from our data? So really thinking holistically around those success factors and metrics and KPIs and bringing that back into the experience to drive an appropriate culture around that.
No more reactive, much more proactive approach.
Exactly. It's social.
I know. It is all social. Yes.
Roles and responsibilities. Oftentimes we think of governance as, the big bureaucracy at the top. And we have our executive councils, and there's a lot of conversation. And then you say, what happens? Well, now I'm going to go fix the data. But really what we're doing is driving a hub and spoke culture around this. Having centers of gravity where expertise about the data and the value from the data is going to come in. And even looking at that directly at the endpoints of your organization. When you said, who's creating the data? They're stewards and custodians, not just creationists. They have a vested responsibility in ensuring that the information that they're collecting and bringing in not only works for them, but will also help drive things and continue to pay it forward to the rest of the organization. So when we talk about the experience of data and making data work, don't forget your end users. Don't forget the fact that nobody likes to jump through 17 different applications to figure out how to provide customer support when somebody's got a problem with their insurance policy and needs questions answered. And oh, by the way, I've been through that process, which is why I explain it that way. And when you're a data scientist and you want to go in and grab data and manipulate it and prepare it, that's great information and insight for the data teams coming back, where they have to now interpret and deploy those models and rationalize them against policies. Yeah. So building a mechanism for tribal knowledge to come through is what we talk about when we say a change in culture and bringing data governance to the edge of your business. Now, what happens? You need an awesome delivery team to do that. Who's going to instrument across infrastructure, your data sources, and your endpoints, from applications to devices to automation? We need engineering and data ops right within our chief data office. They are the masters of delivery, building the services and the pipelines that are going to deliver, taking, just like John Deere did, those data governance requirements and data requirements, mashing them together, and really thinking succinctly about where that drives into the solutions that happen.
The chief data officer that you saw is a trend. If you look at the next 18 months, last 18 months, that there's a huge tick. And you're going to actually see that continuing, because everybody is trying to figure out what their data strategy is, and they're trying to build their organization around it.
Exactly.
And each of those chief data officers are coming with the mindset of, okay, what do I do to get more value out of my data? That's exactly the organization they're trying to establish. I am willing to bet some of you are already in those organizations today.
Exactly. And you need that strategic leader, because the complexity around this, not only in terms of what you want to aspire to with your data, but how you operationalize that, not just from team and delivery, but holistically your program has to come out. Look at all these different processes that are driving towards outcomes, managing around both offensive and defensive responsibilities. Taking into account today more and more, especially as GDPR and CCPA have come on and security breaches are, at record levels, security is brought into the fold. It doesn't just sit over here anymore. When you're moving into more complex data science and artificial intelligence capabilities, you are now tapping into historical archives of your data, turning cold storage into hot storage. What is the life cycle of that? How do
Could
you
you
manage
have used
there?
that data that was
Right.
sitting there? Do you actually know the lineage of your data? Do you know if you can actually use that data? Do you have the process to identify all those?
Exactly. And so creating those policies, recognizing what they are, communicating them, training the organization to do that. All these different policies are resolving themselves around those outcomes and objectives that you're looking at, both from a data governance point of view, as well as your business policies, as well as regulatory and risk management.
Did you see some instances where some good dynamic policy investments and companies are really actually integrating into their business practices?
So,
A few, maybe.
I think the oil and gas industry is amazing in the way that they think about this.
Yeah.
It's very complicated on drawing oil out of the ground. So if you think about the complexity of their partner ecosystem to just build the drill to put down the well, and then run all of the management and maintenance off of that, handling inventory and parts. They really operationalize the data to the tasks.
Yeah.
And so those policies have to balance against things like trusted networks to share information, ensuring that parts aren't coming from the black market and really are to spec and who they've purchased from, so they don't have a drill go down and lose $1 million an hour. Yeah. So you can really see where policies, business policies, risk policies are all brought together just to bring oil to market.
Yeah.
Or energy. I mean, energy, the same thing. If you're on electric
Especially
cars,
about
the same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. So policies are really coming together in that manner too. How do you deal with the complexity?
Wow.
My goodness.
Well,
Tech's got to take care of it.
Automation? Somehow we got to automate these things?
Somehow, some way. Without giving you too much credence, I mean, you kind of need a Google at the center of your environment. And why do I say that? We think of data and how you manage it around this notion of metadata.
Yeah.
How do we describe our information? How do we set policies around that information? How do we see ownership for that data? And where is it located? What's the lineage of it?
Discover where your data assets are.
Yeah.
To begin with, right?
It's just, the first thing we do is profile our information and capture all of that metadata. What does that metadata mean for us, though, is the bigger question. And so then our governance processes come in, and what do? We slap a glossary on top of it so that we put it into business context. Now we got an awesome data governance program where data governance and data management are all coming together, and we'll figure out how to connect all of our systems and make our services and pipelines flow, and we should be off and running to the races, and we're all set. But in the world where we have to change the experience, where democratizing data is much more important than it was in the past, where data engineers don't stop at bringing data into a data lake or into another type of repository, but they have to think about that delivery. They have to think about presentation of information. You need a marketplace.
Yeah.
What does that marketplace look like? So catalogs today start to become that center of the universe of not just describing the physical, logical, and semantic aspects of the data, not just housing all of those policies and ownerships and practices, but also becoming that point, both from services as well as direct access to information, so that you have, and I hate to say it, we're back to a knowledge center, guys. Don't
Smart.
twitch if you remember Lotus. It's so much smarter because machine learning is at the heart of it.
Exactly.
So all
Right.
the social cues that we talked about earlier, you can see what people are sharing.
Yeah.
You can see what people like. You can see what people are changing. You can see what people are saying about information. And that's not just on the consumption side, that's your governance teams, and that's your data management and engineering teams as well. So it's really important to think about how do you bring together the metadata facet, the business glossary facet, and the marketplace and engagement, and build services that are not just about an ETL job or a streaming job, but look at the queries that are running against your information. Yeah. Look at the Python and R scripts that are coming out of your data science notebooks. All of that information really helps you understand not only what data you have and how it can be used, but where it's providing value. And this is my English muffin slide. I like talking about the nooks and crannies of where data lives. Don't just think that that metadata is only in your databases. It's everywhere. How do you manage, like, let's go back to the John Deere situation. How do you manage master data? Is that in an MDM environment? It could be a Kafka topic. Now you're distributing all of these definitions and models about your data across every piece of technology. Your catalogs have to be able to profile and understand and interpret and synchronize that information. It's really critical. This is how you can navigate your fabrics. This is how you have the appropriate oversight.
Don't just think about your apps and where the data is flowing through. Think about the assets. Think about the containers that you're managing. Think about all the servers that your data might be running through it. We really have to consider all that in your system. Mm-hmm.
Get started with it on a smaller basis. Think about your solution. Think about the pipeline first. Begin there so that you're continuously accumulating this information and starting to, I don't know if you're any gamers in the room. You know when you've got your game map open and it's all highlighted and you see a big light in the section of the map that you're in your universe, and then as you move around, the map starts to open up. Okay, not a lot of gamers here.
No, not
sorry. But everything becomes illuminated as you kind of move through, and that's what your catalog should be able to do and help you with. It should start illuminating iteratively through your data ecosystems. Lessons learned?
Go ahead.
All right. One size does not fit all. Your data has to fit the experience and the policies and procedures and culture of your organization. It can drive massive benefits when you tie it to those business outcomes, hopefully driving income to deliver. There is a certain amount of centralization in the organization that is required. Somebody needs to have has a purview over the entire landscape. That's really where that chief data officer comes in and drives some of the top-down priorities and objectives for your data, as well as making sure that the bottom-up is orchestrated appropriately. That's a tough job. It's complex from an operations perspective, as well as from the data perspective. It requires that different approach to empower the enterprise, that notion of tribal knowledge and tribal contribution to get that governance and culture out into the edge and bring that back in.
And there will be multiple tools. Don't be really locked into, I got to have one tool that does everything. There will be multiple services that you're going to put together. Think about the flexibility. Try to solve it around the problem that you have in hand. Pull one thread all the way out. Yep. See what we can actually do.
Exactly. And so measure it based off of the IT objectives, the governance objectives, and the business objectives. And that's ensuring that you're striking the right balance between what is the value your data is bringing, as well as protecting you on the back end from risk.
And don't think governance as compliance only. It's an enabler for you, what you're going to be doing with those capabilities for your business. Yep. A few things we're doing today on Google. We actually announced just about all these things, so I can talk about it now. Some of you may have been using our Cloud DLP services. No matter where your data is. You heard about our programs yesterday, Anthos. And you can actually use it on your on-prem hybrid facilities or in GCP. This is your data loss prevention. This is a fantastic tool For those of you who are concerned about masking the data, it should not be seen by others. You can actually train it. You've been possibly using it today. We announced our metadata management cloud data catalog. This is a capability that actually helps for you to discover your assets, metadata, wherever your data might be. And it's a capability that you can integrate with other tools that are available outside. It might be on-prem tools that you're using through the metadata exchange that you can actually achieve some of these things. These are all there for you to discover. On top of it, you can build some policy management systems, access control systems that you can build. You have an integrated identity access management that I am sure many of you have been using it already today, that helps you identify, create those policies, types of personas who can have what type of data, access where and when and how long. These are all things that you can do today. We have a very aggressive roadmap to really drive what we can help you with. There's a lot of things that we can provide you around the principles of who can access to what data. Many of you have come to us and said, hey, I'm dealing with this thing, and here are my PII data. I don't want anyone in my organization to have access, but I want my analysts to be able to do it, but just mask that data because it has PII data. I don't want to lose that side of that, but only those people who have access can actually control it. So we're providing those capabilities. And there's, of course, the table levels. There's, of course, the role levels. There's a lot of things in here. There's retention policies that you want to run or deletion policies that you want to run. Those are all part of our roadmaps that we're talking about in here. And we will be able to really provide you administrative tools that helps you, gives you knobs that you can actually provide solutions within your organizations, because you need those to be able to drive your policies within your organization, around your business, just as it fits for you.
We looked at the cost of bad data, the consequences of bad data, data governance, the steps to data governance, and technologies to support our data governance efforts.